Stop letting high standards hold you back and start living your best life today. What does it mean to have standards, and how does that affect your life? And how does having expectation play a part with your standards? So often we mistaken having standards and expectations, which are related. However, these are two distinct concepts. Standards are all about yourself, while expectations are an outcome that is deemed acceptable in what you believe. Standards are generally consistent and unchanging, whereas expectations can vary depending on the situation, context, or individuals involved. Standards are more about yourself. It's about setting a level of quality or behavior that you aim to uphold, while expectations are about anticipating or hoping for certain actions or outcomes. You have more control over your own standards because they reflect your personal criteria, choices, values. Your standards defines your personality. It's a blueprint of who you are as an individual. Expectations, however, often involve people or external circumstances that can be influenced by factors beyond your control. The most common problem that we notice today is that most people seem to think that having standards mean that everything has to be done in the way they expect it to be. And while these concepts are related for sure, but understanding what it means to have standards and expectations can really help balancing and manage both personal goals and interpersonal relationships effectively. If you're watching this video today, I am sure many of you would have heard the words high standards, which is being thrown around easily these days, while it is often attached to external aspects such as career success, money, material possessions, or an idealized version of a romantic partner. In today's video, we are going to peel back the layers to see how your standards and expectations are holding you back and how you can take your power back in order for you to have a more balanced and fulfilled life, especially in your relationships. So let's get right into it. If we look at our relationships, we tend to have more expectations instead of trying to uphold our own standards, because as we navigate relationships, our emotions and feelings get in the way of things. And when we do not have a clear self-concept, this often gets lost in the relationship, which is why we often hear people say, don't lose yourself in a relationship, because this happens to a lot of people when they do not have a clear, defined standards for themselves. Human emotions are complex and is that much more difficult for those with unresolved childhood trauma and attachment issues, which is why knowing the differences can really help you to find that balance for yourself and for your relationships. Let's say, for example, if you are newly dating and you have a need for a clear and effective communication. Now, this is your standards. This is who you are, and this is how you show up for everyone, and you are consistent with that. However, the person that you are dating may not have the same standards as you. Probably communication isn't their strongest suit. So instead of saying that they can't meet your standards, you want to try and have that conversation by stating your preferences in terms of how you would enjoy connecting or communicating. So let's say, for example, instead of multiple text messages, you would prefer a quick daily check-in calls, and you are letting them know this is what would be your preference, this is what works for you, and you are not here trying to accommodate what works for them, because this is how you would want to connect with anyone else. If you were not seeing this particular individual, if you're dating someone else, this is exactly how you would want to connect as well. So again, this is a reflection of what you value. These are your own standards. Now, let's say if they are unable to accommodate or they don't make a change after the initial discussion and they continue to display a behavior where they would only want to connect on their terms or do what works for them. Now, this person is clearly not meeting your standards because they are not able to reciprocate in the way you expect. And remember, your expectations are based on what is acceptable to you. And again, expectations are beyond your control. So this is where you have to take a stand and uphold your standards. Now, the problem is that a lot of times when we don't understand what our own standards are, we tend to allow others to take advantage and walk all over us by making compromises. And we have seen in a lot of relationships, people put up with these behaviors that they don't agree with, they tolerate, and then they get upset because their expectations are not being met with the way they want it. When we don't have a sense of self, a strong self-concept, we would often mirror those around us, which is why the people we surround ourselves with can have such a strong hold on us. The things they do, the things they say, we care so much about their opinion of us. We tend to want the approval and the validation of those around us because we don't have a sense of conviction in what we can do for ourselves. Let's say if you are an aspiring artist, now it is very likely that you will not get many people who will come forward to support in the way you desire or seek, and you can just end up feeling demotivated and you would probably tend to hold yourself back, and instead you would choose to do what others expect of you by probably settling for maybe, let's say, a routine 9-to-5 job that may not be aligned with what you truly want for yourself. Whenever you resist to fit into the mold that was built for us by society, you are bound to face a lot of disapproval because every time you refuse the norm in order to do something that is different, it will trigger people who have placed limitations on themselves. However, if you have conviction in your craft, you will push through despite the challenges and the obstacles because you have a grasp of who you are and what you truly want for yourself. Now, there's two things that will happen when you challenge the status quo. You either trigger people who have placed their own limitations on themselves, or you will inspire people to push through their own limitations. Much of what we see in today's society is that we often associate having standards with having a certain level of material comforts. This is not wrong. It's absolutely fine to want to live a life of luxury, to have nice things, to want to drive nice cars, to want to have beautiful home. However, it's only a problem when people place their idea of having standards on material possessions, because when we place so much value and importance on material aspects, the human mind will struggle to see the essential intrinsic human values that is important part of building lasting relationships. One of the many reasons we see relationships are defined as difficult in the era of modern day dating is because everyone seems to have high standards in what they are looking for in a partner without actually defining what their standards really are. What is being interpreted as standards is essentially an expectation of another person, which is superficially focused, and they are never going to be able to control that because expectations are beyond your control. So when you ask someone what they are looking for a partner, most people would give you a list of expectations, but what are your standards? Standards has to be congruent with who you are as a person. Let's say, for example, if you live in a one-bedroom apartment and you draw a decent-sized paycheck, but you say you will only date someone that lives in a luxury apartment or in a fancy home and drives a fancy car. Now, this is your expectation. If you say you will only date a guy who's good looking, who dresses well, who dresses a certain way and is already accomplished, again, this is an expectation. This is not your standard. However, if you were to say that let's say you are this individual who prioritizes self-care, you work out, you eat well, you groom yourself well, you are focused on your career and finances, you've got your life in order, you have got a nice cozy home, you are an excellent communicator, you value these things and you say that these are some of the qualities that you would look for in a partner that aligns with you. Now this is your standards because it's consistent and aligned with who you are as an individual. It's not superficially focused. So when you come into contact with someone who doesn't align with your standards, organically it's not going to work out. Let's say, for example, if you live in a one-bedroom apartment and you draw a decent-sized paycheck, but you say you will only date someone that lives in a luxury apartment or in a fancy home and drives a fancy car. Now, this is your expectation. If you say you will only date a guy who's good looking, who dresses well, who dresses a certain way and is already accomplished, again, this is an expectation. This is not your standard. However, if you were to say that let's say you are this individual who prioritizes self-care, you work out, you eat well, you groom yourself well, you are focused on your career. My standards are that I am an effective communicator. So that's what I would look for in someone that I'm dating. So let's say if the person that I'm dating doesn't align, is not a great communicator, then I can say that this person doesn't meet my standards instead of judging them for the shoes they wear or the watches they wear or the way they eat. Now, don't get me wrong, the material aspects are important and it's in fact an important part of attraction towards another person because it does define their personal style and shapes their personality, but that isn't so much of a standard. Now, let's say I would like a man that is well groomed, that dresses smartly and neatly, because that's how I am as a person. I like to dress up, I'm well groomed, I like to do my hair, I like to do my makeup. So that's my standard and that's what I look for in another person as well. So your standards should consist of the human aspects, which are essentially your core values, and then you have the more superficial aspects, which is of course the lifestyle, and that is equally important as well. But I think a lot of people tend to place so much of emphasis on their expectations, thinking that they are actually having a certain standards of a partner, and that's the problem that we are seeing in the era of modern day dating today, which probably makes it much harder to form a relationship because we have this illusion given by society that it's easy to meet people, which is unfortunately not true. I've been seeing a lot of online dating advice saying, ladies, hold your standards. If he doesn't reply, don't chase after him, don't beg him, don't be a golden retriever. But what are your standards? If you want someone that will communicate with you, how do you expect by doing the exact opposite? So if you want someone to communicate with you, you do not engage in pulling away, giving the silent treatment where you are engaging in a protest behavior, which is the opposite of effective communication. How do you expect someone to meet your standards when you are not even honoring your own standards? You have to set an example for who you are. You have to define your standards by clearly communicating with that person, allowing space for that conversation to take place, give them a chance to come back with a response, and then you make a decision. Now, if the person doesn't reciprocate, does not respond in the way that you expect, now that doesn't seem to align with your standards, which is effective communication. You want someone who's consistent. So when someone doesn't align with your standards, that's when you exit that equation. You walk away respectfully, no passive aggressive communication, end it, take time to grieve that loss, and then you move forward. You need to honor yourself and hold yourself to your own standards before you can expect someone to meet your supposed high standards. It starts with you. You have to be able to give yourself what you want in a partner first before you expect that in return. Our life consists of 3 lines of priority, and I will break it down for you shortly. If these 3 lines of priorities are not in order, then we will not have balance in our life. So the first line of priority, and that is the most important one, which is you. It's the food that you give yourself, the rest that you get, and the physical activity, which is exercise. And these are non-negotiable in my books. Now, back in the days, our ancestors only had 2 meals a day, which is lunch and dinner. They also have a very balanced diet and a very balanced lifestyle. They wake up in the morning, they go out to work to hunt, and then they have heavy lunch meal, and then they come back in the evening, they have dinner, and then they do get sufficient rest. So they are well rested, they've got physical activity where they walk and they work all day, and they have balanced diet. So everything, as you can see, is well coordinated. It's quite cohesive. So this should be your number 1 priority. And then we have the second line of priority, which is your work, your career, your finances, to make sure that you can put food on the table and have a roof over your head. So let's imagine if you do not get your first line of priority in order, which is, resting well or eating well, then you would likely fall ill, or you would probably experience fatigue, and this will impact your ability to perform at work if you are not feeling physically well. So when your body is well rested and well nourished, you are physically and mentally able to perform at optimum, and this further drives your ability to perform efficiently when you're at work. So high performance leads to better rewards in a traditional corporate setting. Now, if you're part of a non-traditional setting, then you would have that vitality and that energy to have the capacity to think and focus on how you want to expand and grow your business, let's say. And this will further drive profits, and this will enhance your ability to be able to make more money. And then the third line of priorities are your relationships with your family and those around you, and your material comforts. This isn't to say that your relationships and your family are the least in your priority line. However, you will not be able to fulfill everything else if you do not get your first line of priority in order, which is to have good health, to make sure that you're well rested, well nourished, which will automatically nourish your second line of priority, which is your work, your career, your finances. And when those are fulfilled, you will be able to show up and extend that to your family, to your relationships. Because how do you give when you don't have enough for yourself? None of this are selfish. It is self-care, and you cannot pour from an empty cup. So when it comes to having standards, you want to break it down into these 3 lines of priorities. So first, look at yourself, your physical body. Are you holding yourself up to standards? That is by making sure you eat well, you are well rested, and you are getting in some exercise regularly. And this should become part of your lifestyle. I've said this before in my previous video, Healing the Relationship with Yourself. So feel free to take a look and check out that video where I say that make sure you make a conscious effort to give the best to your body. Give yourself the best food. My best could be maybe, let's say, spending $30 on a meal because I would normally only spend $10. But your best could be maybe spending $100 on a meal because normally you do spend $30. It doesn't matter. What really does is that when you do this, it activates your energetic vibration in your body to receive the best that you deserve because you are doing it consciously. And when you get your workout in, what are you thinking? Are you focused on losing weight because you want to be seen as a certain way to make an impression? Or are you focused on sweating it out because it energizes your mind and body, and feeling fit gives you the confidence to feel a certain way about yourself. Next, align your standards when it comes to the second line of priority for your work and your career. Ask yourself what kind of jobs would be a good match for yourself, what will fulfill you when it comes to your career, and how much money do you want to make. And don't worry too much about the how and when. Don't get caught up in the details. Remove the mental blocks and set a standard for yourself in terms of what you would like to achieve in your career, and then you build a roadmap and work towards it. There is no magic formula to this. However, when you hold yourself to a certain standard, you will be able to work through the challenges that come your way instead of always settling for the first thing that lands at your hand, taking up the first job that probably underpays you or doesn't necessarily fulfill you because you did so under pressure. Now, I find it interesting when people would tell me that you don't have a choice, just take whatever job that comes your way. However, try turning the conversation back to them. Most people would turn down an offer or refuse to accept a job that doesn't meet their expectation. However, they will not hesitate on imposing this on another person because they are placing their limitations of you. Now, this is how you can end up compromising your own standards if you give in to the pressure by accepting something that isn't truly aligned with what you want. And this is why it is really, really important to know what your standards are and to hold on to it, because I understand the practical parts of needing to pay bills when we feel helpless and a little desperate. We all do, like a lot of us have experienced that. But when you hold on to your standards, you will attract what is in alignment with your standards and your energy. You first have to believe that you are worthy and you're deserving of it, because if you don't believe in your own standards and your own worth, why would anyone give you an opportunity? Now that you are focused on filling up your own cup and setting standards for yourself, you get to explore what kind of standards you would like to set in your interpersonal relationships. So you get to ask yourself what kind of people you would like to be surrounded with. What are your core values? The truth is, when I ask a lot of people what are their core values, they don't even know what to say because most people have not given it much thought. And when you don't even understand what you value, how can you possibly expect someone to fulfill your expectations of another person? That's simply not possible. What do you value? What are your standards? Get clear with that and everything else will line up. That being said, we are not immune to human experiences and problems. However, when you get clear with your own standards and your own values, which are congruent with who you are as a person, it makes it so much easier to attract people who are aligned with you, and you will be able to build a meaningful and nurture a long-lasting connection.